really common theme. All the research that I've seen from all these different states too, cereal rye has been one of our most tolerant, well, the most tolerant really in the studies to the products that they've been evaluating. Now compare that to fall sown annual ryegrass. You're seeing some more red, seeing differences between years, and some of our product families. Hard to make general assumptions here, you know, like dual 2 magnum did fine, one year did not do fine, another year, you know, depending on the location. So, you know, that's a riskier product to use with annual ryegrass. And Valor did okay, except for in Wisconsin. You know, and FlexStar seemed to do all right with the fall sown annual ryegrass. So again, just kind of seeing more issues. Annual ryegrass is more sensitive to a lot of the products that we use in a corn soybean rotation. Compare that to annual radish, or excuse me, fall sown radish. Here are group 15s. That radish did pretty well against those. Didn't see really significant reductions in stand or biomass, but we did see like FlexStar really did a number. So, you know, if you're using FlexStar in your system and you plant radish, and you don't see a good stand, could be the FlexStar. You know, same with Pursuit, does have a high potential to ding that up. And then clover, see a little bit more, a lot more greens here again too. So again, just some, you know, like the group 2s did all right with clover, whereas we're seeing more differences with these group 14 herbicides. Now, when we look at, I know a lot of people look at interseeding a cover crop too, and that's where, again, it gets even more challenging because that was done on fall seeded cover crops. So we had a wider window between application and then seeding the cover crop. Now, when we're interseeding, this is where it gets more challenging. This is work done in Pennsylvania and Maryland. Pennsylvania's done a lot more work with early interseeding of cover crops. You'll see the ryegrass, you know, none of these did very well. Really dinged it up. Whereas, you know, if we looked at like Callisto and Sharpen and so forth, there we did you know, had a better chance of, you know, not having an impact on biomass or stand. And red clover mixed results too. So again, just seeing more risk the shorter the window is. But ryegrass is more sensitive to a lot of the herbicides that we use. Now I know when people are seeding cover crops, and I've had people tell me this too many times, that they want to use a reduced rate, that they are using a reduced rate of a herbicide. And, you know, I say, just say no, you know, that is not recommended. We don't recommend that. You know, again, science is my background. Number one, what do you want to do with that herbicide? You want to control weeds, right? So if you're reducing your rate, you're probably not going to get adequate control, or you're going to limit that control. You could still see injury of that cover crop. Plus, you know, last but not at all least, that's a great way to select for a herbicide resistant population. You know, you're just going to select for weeds that are more tolerant to that product, but if you're using reduced rates. So we do not recommend reduced rates. And just show us, for example, like with polymer amaranth, they had low doses of dicamba used for 3 generations. They found a 3-fold increase in the rate needed for control. So, I mean, it happens. We know this is an issue, so we don't recommend using reduced rates. So just some tips to reduce risks. Number one, if you're going to graze that cover crop, make sure you're following the label. That's a legal thing. You don't want to get in trouble with that. You don't want to have a product that's not marketable. Don't want to have, you know, sick animals. Don't want to get people sick. Okay. So number one, follow the label with that. And also I always recommend, if you're getting started in cover crops, target fields with lower weed pressure. Just gives you a little more breathing space to learn the system and figure out what's going to work. Also seeding that cover crop later in the season, that does reduce your risk of having issues with the herbicide. Also, you know, looking at your herbicide options with your weed program, yeah, identify, you know, what are your key weed problems, look at those herbicides, and then try to narrow it down to what might be a better fit with the cover crops that you're looking at. Half-lives can help give you some guidance. Also, just that, you know, if you're using a broadleaf herbicide, well, a grass cover crop probably tolerate that better. Same as a grass herbicide, you know, broadleaf crop's probably going to tolerate that better. Also, if you're coming in after a drought year, you do have more risk of herbicide carryover in that situation, because again, that microbial activity is going to be reduced. in a drought year, or it's a cooler year potentially too. So that's something to keep in mind. That bioassay, if it's feasible to conduct, you can try that if you want to see a cover crop and you're not sure if you can have injury issues. That takes time to do, so it may not be feasible to do that. But again, if you bring soil in, plant a cover crop in there, and you see good germination stand, and it doesn't die off within about a week or two, you know, you should hopefully be pretty good to go out in the field. Cereal rye is one of the most tolerant species, especially to the herbicides that we're using in our systems. You could look at using a higher rate. Of course, that's going to cost a little bit more too, so you got to pencil that out. But again, we don't recommend that reduced rate of herbicide. So that's kind of what I want to say about that. We do have some research going on right now at the university. This is a project I'm involved with Greg Johnson, Ryan Miller, Ethan Lays, the graduate student working on this, and Scotty Wells. We do have this going on at 3 different sites. We've got, you know, to look at all the different herbicide by cover crop combinations, you could have this monstrous, you know, study out there. It's just not feasible. We had to narrow it down to 4 different products. We're looking at Resicor, Verdict. You can see what's in these. And we're looking at Outlook, and then Outlook layered, because again, kind of representing different herbicide chemistries. And also this layered approach, which we do recommend if you have a big water hemp issue. We're looking at winter rye, red clover, and then camelina, which I look as like a cash cover crop. And then looking at how that impacts, you know, our weed management system. You know, are we seeing an impact on the cover crop for one thing? Are we seeing an impact on, you know, yield? Are we seeing that these cover crops can help us with weed control? So kind of looking at all these different factors. Real preliminary, we don't have analysis run on this yet. And still, this I believe is just 1 year of data in here yet too, but I just kind of wanted to show you, this is the amount of biomass that we're finding at the different sites. This is at Waseca. Here's Rosemont in the lower left hand, and then Rochester in the lower right hand side. And again, these are cover crops seeded in the fall. What we're doing is we're planting corn and treating that like corn silage. So we're harvesting it earlier so we can get a little more time to get the cover crop established. And then, you know, where we have applied these herbicides in the past, we do have a check to it. There's no herbicide. Just some key take homes with this. And again, don't have the stats on here. Whenever we're looking at a benefit of a cover crop, biomass is really a driving factor. How much biomass we can get really drives how much potential benefits we could get from weed control, how much potential nitrate uptake we could get, and how much protection of the soil and so forth. So we want to maximize that biomass. None of these sites got over 3,500 pounds per acre, which is kind of a bummer, you know, because their studies, especially when I look down south at their data, I mean, they're just cranking out biomass production. And, you know, research has shown that, like with Palmer Amaranth, for example, they needed to get at least 8,000 pounds per acre of biomass to really have an impact on weeds. I'm hoping that, you know, we can have some at least marginal impact with a little lower, because again, it's really tough for us to get much biomass up here in the north. So again, that's just one thing. Plus, we're not really seeing any of these herbicides this year really stand out as having an impact on the cover crop, which that's a nice thing too. Even some, you know, Resicor, we thought that would have a higher potential to have an impact. But each year you could have different results. That's why it's real important to do multiple years and multiple locations. And another thing too, just again, trying to optimize this biomass. This is a cool little project that Axel Garcia has done at Lamberton, and helped him out with a little bit with this too. And he looked at 4 different seeding dates of cereal rye in the fall, because that's one of the questions. It's funny, you know, people think we know all this stuff about cover crops, but there's a lot of stuff we don't know, you know, just like when's the best time to seed it? When is too late to seed it? For example. And again, he had 4 different seeding dates of cereal rye. These pictures are taken May 21st. And you can see here's what seeding date 1 looked like. Here's what the second one did, the third one, and the fourth one. Now you just see how much difference in biomass that is. And again, biomass is what drives a lot of the benefits we get from a cover crop. And so when we looked at, we also put in different termination timings on top of these different seeding dates. So here's that first seeding date. And this is where we were terminating it, like about 2 weeks before planting. at planting, and then about 2 weeks after planting. And you can see biomass goes up as, you know, with these different seeding dates in the fall. Whereas that October 8th seeding date, we just really never, you know, that cover crop just really never took off. So kind of what we're seeing, one of the, you know, conclusions from this too, just really to optimize cover crop growth. One thing is you want to, you know, if you can delay that termination to about mid-May, you're going to help optimize growth, but also you want to be seeding that cover crop before, you know, by the mid to late September. Once again, in October, you can still get some established, but you're not going to get very much biomass. And of course, there's trade-offs with that termination timing with corn and soybean to a yield. So we're still working through the data on that as well, because there's other risks with that. It's risk management is just the bottom line. But again, this is kind of a cool little seeding, cool little study. Seeding date matters for cereal rye anyway. One other thing I know you wanted me to mention a little bit about cover crop termination. Something to be thinking about. Yeah, is it going to winter kill? This is just some screenshots off of a publication from Wisconsin. You know, yeah, talking about ones that likely will winter kill. These maybe will, and these likely won't. So then you're going to need to have a termination plan in place in the spring. Also, you know, there's mechanical termination as an option potentially. But you know, this roller crimping, we do not have much information at all in Minnesota on this. I know there was a trial done in Lamberton years ago. Didn't work so hot, I know, but again, what kind of roller crimper was it? When was it done? That's all the things that we don't really know much about. But and I know this is where farmers are trying more different things too. But again, there are some potential options depending what cover crop you're using. But from a herbicide aspect, this is just kind of the general recommendations. Glyphosate really has been the product that has worked the best, most effectively, most consistent in control of a cover crop. It does concern me that, you know, if we keep using glyphosate all the time, you know, because we know we've had glyphosate resistant weeds, so develop over time. But again, it's been the most consistent compared to Liberty, you know, and compared to Paraquat as well. You know, you do got to look at the temperature. It has to be actively growing. If it's not, you know, you're going to have a reduction in control, and that's even more so important if you do try to use Liberty. I was at a field this spring, or well, I should say last spring now. But yeah, they tried Liberty and it just did not work. You know, so again, glyphosate has been the most effective. You can add like dicamba or 2,4-D. You have some broadleafs in there too. But anyway, that's kind of what I wanted to present today. Here's some websites. We have our Extension Crops website, a lot of resources on there. Got a little publication on this rotational restrictions, this using herbicides and cover crops in corn and soybean. I do have to get that updated. But again, that has some nice resources and links on there. This Midwest Cover Crop Decision Tool, always very helpful too. And here's the link. It was not working. I was trying to find that publication too, but Wisconsin does have that, you know, cover crop and forage restrictions too. So with that, that's kind of what I wanted to highlight today. I don't know if you have any questions or what you would like to do next here.
Yeah, anyone have any questions for Liz?
And I'll be around here too, so if you need some time to think about them.
Right. Are there any publications out there? I think there's one from Penn State. Maybe you mentioned that. I was trying to get other people links here to get linked on, but Penn State has one, I know. Minnesota,
Yeah.
I think Minnesota, University of Minnesota has one. Wisconsin has one for chemicals, more for grazing probably than anything else. Missouri has one. So, I mean, they're out there for some help.
Yeah, and again, there's no magical recipe, you know, for it, but especially when you're looking at these, you know, growing the cover crop for soil health benefits. But yeah, Penn State has published information, a lot of that. Well, they've been doing more stuff with interseeding. I'll see if I can dig up those links. I was trying to find the Wisconsin one here too, but And they do have a publication where they're looking at half-life a lot too. You know, not again that you want to put all your eggs in that basket, but they do have some general guidelines with that. Missouri's done some work with, you know, looking at different herbicides. Wisconsin has as well. And South Dakota is doing a few too, looking at like cover crops after wheat herbicides and corn silage too. So just kind of, you know, taking pieces, parts, and we've got a little bit ourselves. But yeah, I just kind of got to look at these general guidelines and see what works and what has, you know, better chance of succeeding, what might not be so good.
I guess I got in here a little late, but I was wondering about with the winter rye. I graze it off, then come back and try to spray it off after I graze it. Or is there anything out there showing what's the best way of doing it?
I mean, after you graze it to kill it off, or?
Yeah, I graze it in the spring. I calve out on it and they graze on it. I usually put them out there first part of April, pull them off like the 10th of May, and then I've planted beans into it and then sprayed it off after I got done planting the beans.
Okay, and that's, you know, that's a little different situation than just, you know, spraying cereal rye, but I would think, unless somebody else has experience with that too, you know, the glyphosate would probably work the best with that as well, be your most consistent. Yeah, somebody's got their restrictions. Thanks, Carissa. So yeah, again, just with the most consistent control, it has to be actively growing, which if you're terminating in May, odds are you should, but that's again, making sure like your daytime temps at least above 60, nighttime doesn't get below 40.
So you probably can't graze it low enough that it's going to kill it off.
When I've done it, I know it comes right as soon as you pull the cows off. Within a couple of days, it's growing right back.
Yeah.
So you probably have to wait a couple weeks for it to get tall enough really to kill it with herbicide then, or let it grow back some, or not really.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to have enough growth that,
Right.
yeah, I mean, I don't know how low your cows would be grazing it, but yeah, you got to have it actively growing. You got to have enough material that it would be impacted. But yeah, so again, I don't know. That's not something I've looked at. I don't know if anybody's got experience with that situation, but
I'm trying to establish cover crops underneath a corn crop, but obviously Callisto is a popular herbicide here because it's a different mode of action, you know, and reasonably priced, so it's popular on corn. But you know, cereal rye, which is what we'd like to get started under, that has a, I think if I remember the chart was 4 months. Well, you're probably not going to get that. You'll have to take your chances, I suppose, and try it, do some experimenting. Oats looks like a nice option, but the problem is you don't get the root mass, you know, from the oats cover crop that you do from a cereal rye. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or options.
so again, you're wanting to graze the cover crop after Callisto, or what?
Just soil health. Just soil health is all.
Okay. Yeah, because again, those rotational restrictions, you know, cereal rye, it has 4 months and wheat has 4, oats is 0. But if you're just doing it for soil health, you know, again, cereal rye, sometimes too, the rotational restrictions, it depends how much work has been done on those too, you know, I mean, because it costs like millions of dollars to run the test, to get the crops on the label, to do all the residual studies. So you don't know if they stopped at a certain point in time or if there really was an issue. I mean, you don't know that really. So, because I guess when I'm looking at the difference with cereal rye and wheat versus oats, because I would, you know, cereal rye I would think it'd be tougher than the oats. So
Well,
I guess my inclination, yeah,
Exactly.
my inclination, it probably would, you know, again, there's no guarantees in any of this, you know, but my inclination, I wouldn't expect a big difference between those. I'm trying to see if they looked at Callisto in one of these yeah, no, I'm not seeing that being looked at anywhere else. But again, cereal rye has just been one of the most tolerant, but oats is right up there too. Typically, it's just not looked at as many times in studies, and wheat is typically up there too.
So Liz, in that one test that you guys were doing with the timing of planting your cereal rye, was there a rain event in any of those, or was that a pretty constant just timing of temperature, ground temperature, and is that the reason it's growing, or was there a rain event in there somewhere? Do you know?
That I'd have to look back at the data. I don't remember what it was in the fall of that, but that last seeding date was the 8th. And, they all did establish in the fall, but yeah, you just never got decent growth in the spring. It just didn't establish as much. It wasn't, of course, not as near as much biomass for that October 8th seeding date as the ones like early in September. But yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'd have to ask.
Maybe if there's a rain, the root system maybe got bigger or something and let it survive winter a little better, so you get more growth in the spring. I don't know.
It's just, I think, again, talking about the Axley is just really looking at date has been a big factor because, again, it is nice to get some, I know people can say it can get going, but yeah, it's just interesting. It never really, seeding really late. We know we can seed really late, but we'd have seen that impact how much growth you get in the spring.
Okay.
So it's best if you can, seed it as early within reason as you can, in the fall.
We seeded ours airplane about the middle of August last year. It's going to be interesting to see what happens this spring with it.
Yeah. I'm assuming higher seeding rate too, then I suppose with the aerial seeding and.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you just remind, that is one thing I'm really glad we got a rapid response grant that we're going to be looking a little bit more into this planting green question. How late can you terminate in corn and soybeans? How much biomass do you need to have, how much impact on weeds could you potentially have? We're just trying to look at not having the cover crop be the sole factor in weed control, but can we get some help from it? And how much help could we get? So one thing we are looking at is seeding rate too, because I mean, if you're an organic system, a lot of organic people, you look at that, they're really seeding it pretty thick, so we're like, well, maybe that might have a factor, so we're going to look at different seeding rates of cereal rye, and then yeah, different termination timings in the spring with a herbicide component layered on top of that too. But just got that fun, and so got to work out all the details now, but
right. So are there people putting down a pre with their chemical that they're going to kill that cover crop off with? Are they putting a pre down with that too? Do you know? I mean, are they putting glyphosate and a pre down and then planting later into it with soybeans, let's say, for instance?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you've got some farmers on here that are doing that too. I know Iowa State has looked at, for example, does the cover crop interfere, with that pre-emergence herbicide, and they hadn't really seen that be an issue. That's always been a concern. If you put the pre down, is that going to having all that residue on there? Would that be a factor? But most of the work that I've seen so far hasn't really seen that to be a big issue. So that's about what I can say. Of course, you got to always watch, antagonism, where, antagonism, that's where the two products together, you're going to decrease the control of them. So you make sure you're looking at the label and what you put in there. Your adjuvants, additives might affect that as well too.
Okay. Any more questions for Liz? There's got to be a lot of them out there. I can unmute everybody.
It's after lunch.
Right. Hopefully they didn't turn it on and go out and do
Afternoon
chores or
siesta here.
something.
But yeah, I mean, it's, again, and we appreciate the input that people have seen too. We haven't tested all the different termination stuff. I mean, Wisconsin's done a lot of work with termination. Iowa State's done a little bit of that too. So, you know, we're use each other's info to help out with that. So.
Well,
But
there's
yeah,
no-
I'll be around if you got any other questions. So.
Okay, there's no more questions for Liz. I think we'll move on to some seed calculators, things of that nature with Corey Walker, our team lead over here. And what area are you in, Corey?
4 out of Alexandria.
They change all the time, so I never know.
Yeah. We're not supposed to go by numbers. We're team out of Alexandria, but covering all the way over to Wheaton. And so that's my area. There's other people on here like Carissa and Kristen that could speak on this. And so I'll try to be as knowledgeable as I can on this cover crop deal. But my staff, I have 2 staff in Wheaton, Jordan and Blake, and they could definitely help you as well. But I'm also available. I oversee what they're working through and questions. And I've been through this. I know Bruce and I have had lots of good chats. I dabble in this on my own farm with cover crops and things and rotation. Thank you, Liz, for the presentation. I definitely grabbed some things out of that. I've no-tilled into standing cereal rye and enjoyed it a lot. It was like planting like butter. So if you're doing beans, going into beans, it was awesome. So we could talk on that all day. But anyway, I am here to talk about cover crop and kind of seeding tools that we have at NRCS. Bruce, I'm going to try sharing my screen and let's see how this works. All right, it should be table 1.
Yep, we can see it, Corey.
All right. So for the agronomists on here, this is something that if I were you, or I've done this when I was in Morris working on this, is I had this table right next to me, and somebody calls, because that's mostly how it is. If somebody's going to call, I want to do cover crop. Okay, what do you want to do? This sheet it doesn't have all this is going to be good for erosion, or this is going to be good for that, or all these other different things. But this is a 2-page, very nice, handy deal that won't get your producers in trouble when it comes to USDA programs. And I can kind of go through this, and I gave it to Bruce a nice seeding chart of kind of how to use this. But I'll go through this fairly quickly, but I'll try to. A lot of people call and they go, I want to seed cover crop. Okay, what are you seeding? How are you seeding it? When are you going to seed it? And this worksheet is what our standards and specs can primarily be based off of. So like, let's just take, for example, you'll see this oats column here. And so you have, and all of our seedings, to not be confused with actual pounds, are in pure live seed pounds. So when you're buying seed, wherever you're buying it from, all of our programs for USDA deal, and I'm sure with the district as well, deal with pure live seed pounds. So that's going to be talking on that actual pure seed on that. So don't be careful when you're buying seed, and we can definitely help you. Like if you bought, you got a tag, you give it to Bruce and he's like, 99% germ, and maybe it's 60% pure. Well, by that calculation, you're going to need more bulk pounds to get to pure live seed. Just something to keep in mind, because some can get confused with that. Anyway, back on this column, if you're going to seed just straight oats, our minimum for incorporated seed, so that means worked in. So that could be drilled, broadcast and cultivated, broadcast and vertical tilled, there's nothing on here that this is cover crops alone. It's not talking no-till or anything. Incorporated 30 pure live seed pounds for 100% mix of oat. If you were going to fly it on, broadcast it on, not work it in, maybe you're in a no-till situation, 45 pounds. Why? We've already figured in the time and a half just because of the breaking it down, getting into the residue, things like that, success. Sometimes people will say that our NRCS rates can be heavy, and I'm not going to attest that, but sometimes, and from experience, sometimes they're not. There's data and there's science behind these. These aren't just arbitrary numbers that our state office picks up on. I can assure you of that. But the other key thing is to look at south of the we're all south of the interstate on this call, I would assume. April 1st, October 1st is our seeding dates. So we're not going to recommend you seeding this later on. Now, if you're outside of a USDA program or something like that, and you want to experiment, more power to you. But for us, this is our dates. So I know like winter rye came up, and our winter rye, this is for 100% stand. I've seeded this, and you're going to get a heck of a stand of winter rye if you, like on corn stalks, say you broadcast that in, you're going to no-till, 83 pounds. It's kind of a weird number. A lot of people might shoot for 90, 100 just because it's a nice round number and that's going to be on there and the plane can carry that much. So you shoot for, that's our minimum. And I would never shoot for bare minimum in case you screwed up a calculation. But 83 pounds of pure live seed, that's pure rye, and you fly it on. Well, I'm going to pick on Mike for a second, but I don't, for equip, we couldn't recommend doing cereal rye interseeding into corn like at early stages. But like we could later on, and we could go all the way up to November 1st, which gives us a lot of time. Say if you got the corn combined or wanted to fly it in maybe August 15th to August 30th. That's all allowable. Interseeding, I know last year I had done some of this on myself. Annual ryegrass could be more in season if you're looking earlier on, and it will grow later into the season. I haven't yet to see it come up in the spring here. We'll see, but the annual ryegrass did grow quite well in with corn. It tolerated shade a little better than oats would. Just some 2 cents I have. Another thing about this chart that I wanted to hit home on is that these are all 100% charts, or rates. A lot of folks, let's just say if you're going to do, maybe you wanted to do annual ryegrass and you wanted to do a radish or something. So if you're going to, I would ask you, well, okay, what are you looking for? And sometimes people will tell me I want to seed X number of pounds, and it's just a math thing at this point. But let's just say you're one of those people that I want to do 50%. Okay, so 50% of 15, 7.5. 50% of radish is 2. There's your seeding rate per acre. Quick, painless, 2-page. Could have it printed out next to your screen or your phone. Not too hard, but just some more math. So anyway, before I go for questions, we do, for those of you that want to plug it into like a tool, we do have this. This is NRCS designed cover crop worksheet, and it's broke down by, if you're one of those folks that want to design it by percent, or if you want to design it by pounds, if you want to deal in pounds an acre. But if we want to do it in percent, we just can start by filling it out. And we want to seed, you can do an acre if you're one of those folks that want to calculate it by acres, or your size of your field is 99 acres, and your resource concerns, well, you're trying to do, soil health is an overarching one, but what's the ones underneath that? You want to reduce wind erosion, weed suppression, things like that. Let's just say you're going to incorporate it. And a lot of times if you're working with it, well, we should, if we're in EQIP, CSP, NRCS should be working with you with a design worksheet like this. You don't have to go it alone. But for those of you that like to play with it and look at it, let's just go back to this example we have and try to plug it in and see. And they have all these species. We got annual rye. We're just going to go annual rye. And it populates it. And let's go with some radish and 50. Now, that is the bare minimum, 100%. I will not recommend that to you because of the oops, or you buy it, say your seed place sells it to you and it's a little bit junkier seed than maybe you portrayed it to be, or this calc says it to be. I would bump that up 120. You know, if you're into cover crops, don't short yourself. Okay. You want to, I mean, and think about it too, is that's a lot of radish. That's 1.56 seeds per square foot. So that's, you can also, if you like to look at it that way, on how many seeds per square foot you have too, if you're trying to design your own calculators. But this bare minimum, but I would shoot maybe even for higher if you wanted to go like that. We'd even recommend, or some of them canned rates that some of you might buy from Agassiz, from Millborn, from the local co-ops. Whatever they are, wherever you get your seed, a lot of them do exceed or meet our specs. Just have somebody plug it in before is my only recommendation, just so you're not, it's the worst feeling in the world when we get to December and you turn in your seed tags and we find out you seeded it at half the rate. Don't be that way. We can try to help you beforehand and make sure you're not spending money for nothing. So Bruce, and then the nice thing in this design tool is you can do it percent design. Again, let's just say you wanted to be like, well, I might just broadcast it in. Flip it over to non-incorporated, it ups your rate. Just automatically. You don't have to do any math. You just plug it in. It's also got this whole Excel, that same chart that I was showing you, and some other characteristics if you really want to dig into specific species for each performance roles or disadvantages and things like that. So those are two excellent resources, really one, but on that I've used for cover crops and cover crop design, and that's what we would be using at NRCS for any equip for CSP type cover crop mixes. Bruce, anything else you wanted me to cover, Bruce, on that?
No, I think, you just toggle back and forth between, incorporated and non-incorporated, and you can definitely see, those rates change. So, kind of with all these cover crops, what the biggest thing that I've learned over the last 3 years is we need to have plan A, plan B, and plan C. And that's for your chemical treatment, that's for your fertilizer treatment, that's for your seed. I mean, last year we had, I think, 2 people that were going to incorporate it, and all of a sudden it come, time to seed, and all of a sudden it was wet. Oh, we're going to aerially apply it. Hey, that's fine. The first year, we learned that, we've got to have that plan B or that plan C, so that we don't run into that issue of not having enough seed if we go to aerially apply it. When we go to check out.
Exactly. That's been a common thing, and I'm happy you brought that up, because we might have an incorporated seed mix here, and you go last minute and you're flying it on. Well, it could be not real well. It's going to be lower. You had a plan for a lower seed mix rate. Flying it on is going to be a little bit more, and so just. Yeah, that's a very good point. I would think to have a couple different things. And also it comes down to your chemicals, which we all just heard about too, that is something to consider. Obviously follow those labels. That's what we have to tell you. But and if you're grazing it, if you're not, things like that. And but yeah, if your chemicals and all of a sudden you had to put something down because it's not worth to let the weeds go and fight that for years just to get this cover crop on. It's try to have it in unison, but you still can't let it go to giant or, ragweed and water hemp and everything else. maybe that has to change up your cover crop then, because you wanted a big diverse mix, but you sprayed something that's going to nuke all that. Well, maybe annual rye, oats, something else like that could fit the bill. So very good point, Bruce, on that.
And some of that comes down to, the beginning of this page. I know I sat down with every one of you guys, we first started, and what is our goals, and they're right up on top up there. We got to look at what we're going to plant based on our goals. But sometimes we might not hit that goal that year if it's wet and we can't get it planted, or we've got weeds, or that's where that plan A, plan B, plan C comes in. So, that's one thing I'm going to try to focus a little bit more with you guys on this year, knowing a little bit more than I did last year. So no, I mean, that's perfect. You guys have some questions about the calculator or about, I see that there's some questions and comments over here. Want to thank Carissa and Kristen for adding those links. Someone says, can we get this table, Corey? Yeah. Did we put that? Can we link that?
I put it in the chat, Bruce. So
Okay.
I attached agronomy tech note 33, which it's on page 19 of that tech note.
Okay, thanks, Carissa. That's awesome. So a lot of different things there from Liz too. So make sure you're watching the chat over there, or turn your chat on. And this will be recorded if you guys want to. Being recorded now, if you want me to send you a link to it so we can see this. Yeah, any questions for Corey on that? No? Okay. You have one, Mike?
No, I
Okay.
mean, Corey did a nice job. I mean, seeding rates, obviously, when we're trying to establish in growing crops with corn and soy production is challenging because you spread more seed, obviously, but it is what it is. Wider rows, that whole discussion, but that's a different topic about trying to get it seed incorporated or planted, in standing
Well,
crops.
and what I've kind of learned is we don't want to, with cover crops, and all of you in NRCS and extension can chime in too, but what I've taken out of this in the last year is we don't want to change our whole farming for cover crops. We want to find what cover crops are going to work for our goals in how we're farming. So, I mean, I think that's the easiest way to start right now. And then we can progress, further once we get started. So,
and agreed, it's not a cookie cutter. Like, it's not going to work maybe everywhere the same exact. I mean, there's some common things that it seems like cereal rye has been successful in a lot of parts of the country as a standalone. As all of you know, a lot of these small grains can just about grow on a piece of concrete if there's enough moisture and a little bit of dirt hug there. The successful species to maybe try to get some site success, I guess, but it definitely is not a cookie cutter, but trying to fit it into your goals. And something that I think I've learned is look at it as a part of that crop. The cover crop is a crop, and where are you going to get at it the next year? Because we're always planning, okay, it's going to be corn, then it's going to be beans, or going to be this crop. What's going to be after? You're going to start the cover crop, then what's going to be after? So fit it in as a management goal and not just an annoyance because it's a buzzword. So I guess that's my 2 cents.
I just cereal rye. I mean, you mentioned it, Corey, about on your own farm that it provides a nice seed bed to plant soybeans into, I believe. And I've got a bunch of friends in the Eastern Corn Belt, Ohio specifically, in Indiana, that they're doing that, religiously, I'll say it that way. But in our northern climate, they get, they get to grow, they get to establish their cereal rye in the fall for a longer period of time than we do. And then they're planting into, 24, 30-inch high rye in the spring. And they say it's the best soybeans they've grown, but we're just trying to figure that out here in our climate. That's a challenge.
Yeah, no, I've done it a couple years now in a couple different, like a heavier ground scenario, and that broadcasting into corn stalks was definitely patchy. Anything with corn, with broadcasting was kind of patchy. But it was there, and where the rye was, it was awesome. I mean, it was like in the fall, it looked like nothing. And I seeded it in October after it was combined. It was like, what is going to be here in the spring? And then all of a sudden it started growing. And it was patchy. It was definitely the first year. The next time on a different parcel, I had done a diverse mix, and it was after a small grain, but I did cereal rye with a mix, and I backed the cereal rye all the way off to 15 pounds. Of course, it was in a mix, so it came out to our full rate. But even at 15 pounds, that cereal rye was very easy to plant into no-till with, it actually worked out so well. I didn't need to do a first pass of any type of chemical for that beans until the beans were 4 inches tall. So it was that worked well for me. I definitely learned you got to watch your moisture management. That's also a management thing, because that rye is going to be sucking moisture. So, I mean, that's something I think of that's a positive about rye in our wetter climate, colder potentially. But who knows if this year's going to be a drought? Who knows? I think that's something, if you do have rye, to be watching it carefully to terminate it so it don't use up a lot of your moisture. So just another thought. All right. Well, thank you, Bruce.
Yeah, thank you, Corey. I am going to try to share my screen again. Yeah. I'm just going to talk. Oh, where'd I go? Man, all these screens, huh? Come on.
Overlaid on top of it.
Let's see that.
I would just get out of that real quick and then slide that over to your other screen. Yeah.
Bear with me here.
And then,
Oh, we got to share this one.
yeah.
Come on, computer. Okay. There it is. But now I can't see the other one over here. Trying, man. Where'd everything go here? There we go. And share.
And then down below.
I know. God, I got too much stuff open here.
And then you click on that far right one.
Okay. That's the wrong one.
Yeah. Go back over and.
Sorry about this, guys.
No, down below. This is
I know, that's what I thought too, but
what happened to you.
I don't know where it went.
Unless it's laid over top.
We can see your presentation. It says cover crop seed. What are you planting?
Okay. So basically what I want to go over today is just a little bit about seed and Minnesota seed law. So basically we've got cover crops. What are you got to know what you're planting, knowing the quality of your cover crop. I mean, just going out and getting any old cover crop, throwing it in there, probably isn't going to work very well as far as for quality, and knowing really how much you're getting on. So like it says there, knowing the quality of the cover crop seed you plant is critical to obtaining results you expect. So you basically want a higher germination, higher purity, good seed quality. You don't want to be planting anything with noxious weeds. So that's something kind of to think about. A couple of the things that you want to look at is, where's the seed coming from? What origin? Where's the origin of the seed? What areas? Is there weeds in there that's resistant to some herbicides? And then we bring it up here. Iowa, I know, has a lot of Palmer amaranth down there. If we're getting some cover crop seed from down in that area, bringing it up here, we could possibly get it into our crops. So that's one thing we don't want. Will that variety even grow here? If you're growing your own chemical, or chemicals. If you're growing your own seed, we got to make sure the germination and the purity is good on that seed. So we really want to get that tested. Has it been professionally conditioned? Seed producers, that's one thing. They know how to store the grain, they know how to handle it, they can properly clean it, condition it. So that's one thing kind of look at. There are places around here I've checked into, if you're planning on growing your own, that can grow, or that can clean your seed, and that helps with better purity, germination, clean out some of the weeds, so you don't have to put quite so much on. As we were talking about before, when you're talking about pure live seed, it's going to be a lot easier to put down, if you're supposed to put down 50 pounds, it's a lot easier to put down close to 50 pounds than it is have to put down 100 pounds of seed. So that's one good thing, if you can get it conditioned. So like I was saying, if you're growing your own, you still need a germination test. You still need a purity test for us so that we can plan how much you need as far as pure live seed. Pure live seed is basically purity percent times germination percent divided by 100. So basically, if I'm looking at this, at the results, if I got 85% purity, 60% germination, I'm looking at 51% pure live seed. So when I'm looking at that chart, I almost need double the seed to put that down to get actual pure live seed. So something to think about. Another thing when you're buying seed, that's something to think about. If you look at the tag, and it looks like it's a cheaper price per pound, make sure they're selling it to you for a pure live seed price. Because what I just told you there was 51%. Well, I buy it from another grower that's his is 99% pure, 90% germ. That's 89%. The PLS is 89%. So I don't need to buy nearly as much of that seed as I do the other. So even though the one might be a little bit more expensive per pound, if the germ is better, it's going to be cheaper in the long run. So we can get, I know there's been a couple growers that have grown their own, and we have sent that off to MDA to get tested. I believe it was $34 for a germ purity test. We also checked on weeds for Minnesota weed law to make sure that we weren't replanting any of those. So Is it properly labeled? I know for NRCS, any USDA program, and for our program, we either need, if you're growing it yourself, that germination and purity label, or if you're buying it from someone, we need a label that has a lot of the, I gotta get to it here. All seed that's sold must be labeled properly. It has to include the kind of seed, the variety of seed, purity, germination, lot ID, the labeler's name and address. So make sure that when you send that in to us, we have all that information on it. So says the next one is a seller or reputable dealer. I mean, you want to be buying it from someone that's reputable. You know, they're going to make sure that the labels are on there that you need. You know, they're going to make sure that they've handled it properly. They're going to probably know the laws, hopefully, so they know that them seed laws are all being followed. And they should be able to answer most of your questions about that seed. Is it gonna do what you want to do? Is it gonna grow where you're trying to grow it? So that's just another thing. You know, there's several pretty good reputable dealers around here, but just make sure that you know what you're buying and who you're buying it from. So, and the last one, you know, make sure the seed's being sold legally. The Plant Variety Protection Act. If you've got, you know, make sure that that variety isn't protected. And if it is, you can get in an awful lot of trouble by harvesting that seed and then replanting it or selling it to somebody else. So basically, I was just talking to Don Opdahl. He's kind of our MDA rep in this area. And he was saying that the royalties are based on the harvested quantity, not what you planted. So if you planted, you know, a bushel, they're going off the harvested quantities. So they go out there and you see, even if it's a cover crop and they can see that it's 80 bushel rye, you're paying 3 times the harvested bushels. So don't brown bag it, he basically said. He said, if you have any questions, you can definitely call him, and I can put his info up on the screen. So he's a great guy. He knows more than I do about it. He basically said, don't get too carried away about, you know, telling them what they can and can't do. If they need to know, give them a call. But those are kind of the highlights that I've found, I guess, about the seed laws and things that you want to know about. So in conclusion, for me, I guess it's just, if you're buying seed, make sure it's from a permitted seller. You know, I know it's pretty easy with these cover crops to see the neighbor has some over there. I'm going to go buy some from him, throw it in the ground and make it work. And this isn't even just a NRCS or USDA or Soil and Water. I mean, this is Minnesota state law. So make sure that you're following the state laws so you don't get yourself in trouble as far as that goes. And I know we've talked about this many times, you know, how in the world can them dealers get 25 cents a pound when I'm only getting, you know, I can go raise it for $9 at the elevator, but for $9 a bushel. So they've got to go through all the permitting and all of the testing and cleaning and bagging and hauling and everything, which I understand that that's probably still, they're probably still killing us on that, but just make sure that, you know, we're following the state laws anyway. So cutting corners and planting the cheapest and most convenient seed can be costly in the long run if you get fined or it doesn't work. you know, you might possibly get some bad seed. You throw it out there, you're set back a year. So basically, know what you're planting. So with that being said, do we have any more questions? Do we have any questions on that? I don't know how much I can answer. There's probably other people that can answer this stuff way better than I can, but any questions on that? To anyone? Trying to go back to. Maybe no one even heard me.
We heard you.
Minnesota Crop Improvement Associations probably has the best information on that PVP and some of the seed quality stuff too. Or if people are wanting more information.
Okay. Thank you, Carissa. Anyone have any questions on anything? I know we've been going an hour and a half now, and I know I always say we want to keep it to an hour and a half to 2 hours at the most. People are busy. Do we want to get into any type of fertilizer talk today or move that on to another day? And if we do move it on, what requests do you have as far as fertilizer? You know, I think a lot of us are going to be in a situation where we're going to try to plant green, at least into our corn into cereal rye. You know, I think the biggest question that I have is how do we move forward with getting all of our NP and K down without working it?
Bruce, I did ask, this is Liz, I did ask like Jeff Fetch for some information, and I could like forward that on to you, what he wrote too, basically, just some general recommendations. You know, it's kind of based on soil tests, because again, placement, that's the key, you know, and if you're just putting it on the top and no till, you know, over time, if your soil tests get down into the medium or lower range, you could run into some trouble. So, I mean, I could just forward on to you what he had written, if that would be of help. You know, if you want to send that onto the group, or if you want me to talk about that a little bit, or whatever, but.
Okay. Well, I know it's what the group wants. I mean, what's the group want to do? You guys want to continue on? Do you want to put fertilizer for another day? Don't all talk at once.
Hey, Bruce, this is Jim Guy. I would vote for doing it more another day.
Okay. Yep.
Appreciate everything that's come out of this
fine.
one. I appreciate everything that's come out of this one.
Yeah, it's a lot of topics.
Yep.
One other topic, Bruce. One other topic is I'm always curious about the possibility of strip till to plant corn into rye. But I would want to do some strip tillage. So I don't know, sometime down the road, I don't know if there's anybody around this local area doing that. But it's just a topic I'd like to get into more.
We actually do have someone in the southeast corner of the county. And I know our board has talked about trying to purchase a strip till piece of equipment. The problem we're running into at the moment is we've got 30-inch rows, we've got 22-inch rows, and we got 20-inch rows.
Mm-hmm.
Those things don't adjust very easy.
Agreed.
So if anyone can come up with a solution for that, that'll be great. Yeah, I think that if I was farming, I think, you know, if the piece of equipment was available for me, I think that's where I would go. Strip till along with cover crops, I think that is probably the ultimate as far as helping with fertilizer placement, how to get the fertilizer down. Maybe warming up that soil a little bit in the spring, drying it out on that strip. So with still cover crops in between there, doing for soil health, nutrient cycling, water infiltration, all those things that we want it to do. So anyone have any questions? I mean, it doesn't matter what it's for. Like you said, previous topics, I'm definitely going to write that down. I will try and get someone on here with experience. And we'll probably do that with our fertilizer in our next meeting. I think that'll be a lot easier to try and justify on my part, except for, you know, price of equipment. But I also know of a few people that rent that stuff. So, you know, that's always an option too. Well, I guess if there's no other questions or topic items for the future, this agronomist, is this something that's helpful for you guys? Do you guys want to be in on kind of all of our Zoom meetings?
Yeah, speaking for Randy Larson, yeah, I do want to listen in. The yeah, it's a different perspective from what we get a lot of times. And then cover crops, if you don't have a client that's into it, you need to learn from other sources. So I'd like to be invited.
Okay, because I think you guys are a key component to trying to get, you know, these cooperators maybe somewhat motivated, but you know, to help them along. If all of a sudden you've got, you know, other groups saying, oh, you should try cover crops, and your agronomist is saying, oh, I wouldn't try that. A, because maybe you don't think it works, but I think B, more just the educational side. If you're not, myself, I wasn't educated in it before a year ago, and I'm still really not. I'm learning an awful lot, but
well, I'm a long ways from being an expert on this stuff. But as a guy who just finished reading the book Worst Hard Times last night, about the dirty Dust Bowl and the dirty 30s, kind of motivates you to listen a little more. And
right,
I'm not even close to an expert on this stuff right yet.
My head still spins every time that I'm on one of these things. So, I mean, I learned something every time. I probably watch one of them a week. You know, Mosh is a good one that I seem to watch once a week or am on it. I learned something every time I listen to it. I learn a little bit more and a little bit more. And until you do it and until you are out talking to people and doing it yourself, it's hard to grasp it all. But that's why we have Kristen on, and we have Liz on, and we have Chris on, and we have Jennifer on, and Corey.
I wish I was a little younger so I could get into this. By the time I get into it too far, I'm going to be retired or in the box, one of the two. So, but yeah, it's pretty cool stuff, actually.
You know, and there's been a lot of people doing it for a considerable amount of time. That's what, you know, I think it's fairly new, but boy, when you're listening to some of these other Zoom meetings, I mean, some of these people have been doing it for 15, 20 years, and it's like, holy cow. And they're in Minnesota, you know.
And they've been making it work.
And they've been making it work, and I'll tell you. So, and they always say, you know, that's maybe one mistake that I did last year when we were doing, you know, we tried going too fast, too quick with maybe too complex of mixes. You know, what they're saying is the easiest, just about every one of these that I listened to, they started with cereal rye in their corn, green planted their soybeans into it the next year, and those acres were off and running. Then the next year they did some more with that same formula. And, now they've progressed on to some of these fancy mixes, but, I think people maybe want to do too much with it. And that's what most of them say. Everyone wants to jump right in and do too much, and then they fail. And that's something that I think we all have to take a step back and think about, and just, hey, let's do cereal, rye, and corn. Let's plant our soybeans into it the next year. Then those acres are kind of conditioned and we can move forward. So hopefully you guys are getting something out of these meetings. I'm not very good at doing them, but that's why I try to get enough people that know what they're doing to talk anyway. So with that being said, if no one else has any questions, I'll try and send out an email on the next one. We'll probably have one in March here sometime. What works best for you guys? Mornings? This one's in the afternoon, which usually don't work very good for me, but that's when most other people could make it. So mornings, early in the week, late in the week, middle of the week. It's hard to get these many people together. So bear with me when you get a doodle poll, and just try and fill it out the best you can, please. Because we got a lot of people that it takes a lot of time to put one of these on, and I hope you guys are getting something out of them. So with that being said, anyone have anything else? Otherwise, we're probably going to end the meeting. Well, I want to
Appreciate your
thank
time
Liz and
to put this together. Appreciate it.
you bet. Well, I want to thank all of you for being here, and for Liz and Corey for speaking, and Carissa, you're next on the list for me. So
Yep, I'll be there for you.
and Kristen. All right, sounds good. Thanks
Thanks
guys,
for having.
and we'll see you soon.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys. Great
Yeah,
job.
thank you. Hoping it stops by itself, but yeah, maybe it should.